I'm Trey, and this is my Adobe Premiere workflow. For the sake of this video, I'm going to be showing how I would edit and put together a wedding, since that's what I'm most familiar with. But this can be applicable to any other type of shoot or project. Hopping right in, we're going to go straight into Premiere. First, open Premiere Pro. Once it's opened up, go to your project window and begin creating bins. I recommend doing this because it will keep your assets organized and in places that are familiar to you. For the sake of this example, I'll do a footage bin, an audio bin, a music bin, a sequences bin, and a graphics bin. Within the footage bin, I will create even more bins to organize my footage. For the sake of this example, since we're doing a wedding, I would do a bride bin, a groom bin, a first look bin, a ceremony bin, and a reception bin. And I would then use that later to import my footage into those. Next, begin importing your footage. Open up Finder or Explorer and drag that footage into the bin. Now for this particular example, I'm not going to show you the edit of an entire wedding film. We honestly would be here for hours. So with that said, I'm only going to be selecting a few select clips from a wedding. On to the next step, which is calling or selecting your footage. Getting started with calling your footage. In the footage bin, select your first clip. Scroll down to the very bottom, press Shift and click the very last clip. Then scroll back up to the top, right-click the first clip and select Create New Sequence. Go ahead and take this sequence and drag it over to a sequences bin so that it can all stay organized. Then go ahead and rename this sequence Call Sequence. That way you know what the sequence is for. In the call sequence timeline, the first thing that I'm going to do is copy and paste all of the clips from the beginning to the very end. I do that because I want to have a backup from the very beginning of this project. You're going to hit Command or Control A. This will select all of your clips. Command and Control C, this will copy all of your clips. Scrub the playhead all the way past the very last clip and then hit Command or Control V. This will paste your clips. Alternatively, you can hit Command or Control A, and then while holding Alt, you can take your footage and just drag it over to where you want it in the timeline. This will also copy your footage. Before we start calling or selecting our footage, make sure that your selection of playhead is selected. You can find this under your sequence dropdown and at the bottom. This will mean that wherever your playhead is in the timeline, that clip will be selected. In the timeline, I cut and select my footage with one of two methods. My first method, I simply scrub around from clip to clip. I find my desired endpoint and my desired outpoint. With the playhead at the desired endpoint, I will hit Command or Control K. This will place a cut there. I then will go to my desired outpoint and I will hit Command or Control K again, and this will make another cut. With the desired clip selected, I will hit Alt up arrow. This will move it up to the track above it, which should be track 2. Track 2 will act as my selected footage and track 1 will act as my rejected footage. Go ahead and go through every clip and do this to get the footage called. For me, I will change Command or Control K to simply K in my keyboard shortcut preferences. This will just help me speed up my process. Once this is done and you've called all of your footage and you have your selected and your rejected footage on separated tracks, zoom out so you can see all of your footage. While holding Shift, click and drag to select every single clip on track 1, which should be your rejected footage. With all of those rejected clips selected, hit Command Delete. This will cause it to do a ripple delete. It will delete all the rejected footage and move all the selected footage up and next to each other. Method 2 that I use for cutting and selecting footage begins with finding my desired endpoint on a clip. With the playhead in the desired place for my endpoint, I will hit Shortcut Q. This will ripple delete everything behind the playhead, so to the left of the playhead. Then scrub around to find the desired outpoint. And with the playhead at the desired outpoint, hit Shortcut W. This will ripple delete anything past the playhead for that selected clip. Now go ahead and go through every clip and do this. Honestly, between these two methods, I go back and forth between the two. Sometimes I'll do method 1, sometimes I'll do method 2. I don't really have a set way of doing it between these two, and sometimes I even blend the two. Once I've called all my footage and ripple deleted all the footage that I don't want, I then will begin to balance my audio if I'm using audio. Not all of my projects use the audio from the video that I've taken. In my call sequence, I'll simply go from clip to clip and adjust the levels by ear or by the audio meter, just making sure that it's not clipping. You can even take it a step further by selecting all of your clips, right-clicking and selecting Edit in Adobe Audition. Within Audition, you can go through and tweak all of your clips to an even greater degree. Once you've done all that, go to File and select Save All, and this will automatically update everything in Adobe Premiere. But I'm not going to go super in-depth for this because we're showing a wedding, and typically for most of the weddings I shoot, I don't use the audio from those clips. Next, you'll want to begin forming your storyline. For weddings, I really like to edit to a music track. The reason for this is that it helps the emotion of the day be felt throughout the video clips so that the cuts land on beats or snares or kicks or whatever it may be that jumps out as an accent in the song. Go ahead and import your music by dragging it from your Finder or Explorer into your audio or music bin. I recommend go ahead and moving your called footage from the call sequence to a new sequence. So in your sequences bin, go ahead and go down here, select new sequence, name it what you desire to be. In this case, it's going to be bridal party. I'm then going to drag the call footage from the call timeline up to the new sequence tab and then drop it in there. Before I get started cutting, I'm going to go ahead and select all my footage and make another copy of it at the end so that I have an additional backup. With your called footage in this new sequence, go ahead and begin arranging the clips around to form your storyline and make it into a very aesthetically pleasing arrangement. Once you're done arranging your footage, you can go ahead and add your music. When editing to a song, find a beat or an accent that is consistent throughout the song that you can make consistent cuts to. Maybe it's the first beat of the measure, maybe it's a snare, maybe it's a kick drum, maybe it's the guitar. Go ahead and use your taste and you decide what would be best for this situation. Go ahead and go through these clips with one of the methods that I've mentioned before on cutting and calling your footage. This will be a very quick way to make those edits that you need to make with the beats. So as you're wrapping up editing to this song, it's time to move on to color correcting. When it comes to color correcting, I like to use the color workspace. It's a very easy workspace to work in when it comes to going through large amounts of footage to get the colors corrected. In the color workspace, make sure that your scopes are open. I prefer to use this scope here. The top of the scope shows you where your white value can be, the middle of the scope is about where your gray values are, and the bottom of the scope is where your black values are. If anything is in the white or up against this line, it's blown out, it's washed out, and it's gone. If anything is against this line at the bottom, that means it's completely black and there's no more data in it. I prefer to use the Rgb Curves effect when it comes to color correcting my footage. I begin by adjusting the whites of my alpha channel and the blacks of my alpha channel. I'll make sure that they're just right up against the line at the top and at the bottom. I'll then go through and match up my red, my green, and my blue values within the scope. Matching the RGB of your whites will give it a perfect white balance. Matching the RGBs in your blacks will give it a perfect black balance. I don't think that's very commonly heard of, or I haven't commonly heard of it. You can navigate from clip to clip quickly with the up and down arrow. The up arrow will move the playhead to the beginning of the previous clip in the timeline, and the down arrow will move the playhead to the beginning of the next clip in your timeline. I find this very useful to help me navigate quickly throughout when color correcting. And it's helpful to make sure that you have your selection at playhead selected. I mentioned this before. You can find it in the sequence drop down at the very bottom. Make sure that that's checked off. And a little side note that some clips are going to have the same exact lighting situation and camera situation, so that means you can just simply copy and paste your Rgb Curves effect to get the perfect color correcting done to it. Once you've gone through and color corrected all the clips in your sequence or scene, you then want to move on to color grading to stylize it a little bit further. In your project window, create a new adjustment layer. I tend to place my adjustment layers into the sequence bin. You can make an additional bin for this and place it there if you would like. Move that adjustment layer on your timeline on the track above your called and color corrected clips. In the color workspace, use the Lumetri tab to use the Lumetri color to give a stylized look to your color grade. Currently, I've been going to the Creative tab and using the Cinespace LUT. I turn down the intensity quite a bit, push my vibrance a bit, and push my saturation back up. I will then go to the color wheels and put a little bit more warmth into my mids and my highlights, and then a slight bluish tint into my shadows. This does the typical blue, orange, teal, orange cinematic look that tends to be popular, but I find that it really does help warm up the footage, especially for a wedding. Make sure that you don't overdo it too much. If it begins to start looking too much, you can simply select your adjustment layer, go up to the effects panel, and just turn down the opacity. That'll affect the overall effect that the adjustment layer has on the clips below it. Once I've gotten to a desired color grading that I like, I then can finally add any necessary graphics at maybe the intro or the outro, depending on what it is. So for this here, I'm simply going to do a graphic called The Wedding to keep it simple and to keep it quick. Now I'm going to drag this graphic onto the timeline. I'm going to place it above my color grade and above my called footage. Then I'm going to turn my effect to screen and put a cross dissolve at the very beginning of my sequence. That way my video fades from black into the scene. Then I'm going to add a dissolve at the end of my graphic so that it fades out over top of the clip. Now with all of that process done, it's time to export. I'm going to hit Command or Control M to open up the Export tab. I'm going to select QuickTime, Apple ProRes 422, Maximum Render Depth. I'm going to select Maximum here, and then I'm going to make sure it's saving to where I want it to. And then I'm going to hit Export. And with that, it's done. And that is my Adobe Premiere workflow. Thank you so much for watching this. If you are watching this, I'm sure that you've become a patron, and I'm very grateful for that, and I thank you for that. Please stick around for more content like this. If you have any questions, concerns, or comments, or maybe something you want to see, go ahead and get in touch with me. I'd absolutely love to hear from you. With all that said, I'm Trailer Fever.